Hi, I'm Mykola Mirshinchenko and welcome to my channel. Serialization is the process of converting data used by an application to a format that can be transferred over a network or stored in a database or a file. In turn, deserialization is the opposite process of reading data from an external source and converting it into a runtime object. Together, they are essential to most applications that exchange data with third parties. Let's look at how these processes work to understand them better. The operation transferring data can be split into three parts: actual objects that we're working with, serialization, in this example via a JSON serializer, and encoding and output. At the first stage, we have the data that we want to transfer. In our case, we've got a customer class. Let's say we have a customer with ID 1 and name Joe. Now we want to transfer this information over a network. To do this, we need to serialize our customer via JSON serializer. The serializer will give us the JSON of our Joe customer. Now, this is great, but computers communicate with one another using bytes. So the next step is to encode this data into bytes. We do this with the help of an encoder and encode our data. This is a very short description of how data is transferred. Now, as you can imagine, this process has an opposite side as well. When we want to read a sequence of bytes and get our object, the first step is to go through the encoder to receive our list of primitive data types, or JSON, and then we can deserialize our JSON into a customer data class with an ID and name inside. And that's pretty much it. This is, of course, a very simplified depiction of what's happening under the hood. Now let's see what other libraries and formats we can use. Kotlinx Serialization is a powerful library and can be very flexible. With Kotlinx Serialization, we can use different formats to serialize our data like JSON, XML, CBOR, and protobuf. If you don't know what CBOR is, I'll leave the link with an explanation below. We can also integrate some third-party libraries with Ktor if we don't want to use Kotlinx Serialization. Some of the third-party libraries you might already be familiar with are Gson, Gson, and Moshi. You can also use JSON and Gson with Ktor. Now let's look at some advantages of Kotlinx Serialization. Kotlinx Serialization provides compile time safety, meaning you'll know at compile time whether your class can be serialized or not. For each class you annotate with a serializable annotation, a custom kserializer class will be generated during compilation. Kserializer knows everything about how to serialize and deserialize your class. This is different from libraries like Gson and Gson because they use runtime reflection for deserialization. This means that you can get runtime errors with these libraries when trying to transfer your data. Finally, let's take a look at a small subset of features that Kotlinx Serialization has. Just like with other frameworks, you can change field names during serialization. Let's say we have a class dog with two fields, name and breed. Now, if we want to rename a field, all we need to do is annotate the field with a serial name annotation and put the new name there. And this will result in a modified JSON. We can also remove a field during serialization. This is done by annotating the field which you want to ignore with a transient keyword. And the last example here is validation. By using a secondary constructor, you can actually validate fields of your class during serialization. If the validation fails, it will result in an exception which we can then catch. These are just a few examples of what this library can do, so I'll leave a link for the full documentation below. And that's it. Now let's apply our knowledge in practice. In Ktor and KMP, most of the time we're using JSON for data transfer, so we will be integrating Kotlinx Serialization with the JSON data type. To demonstrate this, we'll build a simple note-taking app that does HTTP requests, and we will use the JSONblob.com endpoint, which doesn't require any authentication to avoid getting an API key. You can find the link to the starting code in the description below. Okay, let's take a look at it. Our app will simply have a message and an optional author. We will be able to write a note and it will be sent over to the server at jsonblob.com, and then we'll fetch all of our notes automatically. Now let's inspect the code a little bit to understand what's going on. To start, go ahead and check out the branch Ktor Serialization Start. The final solution for this video is on the Ktor Serialization Solution branch. Okay, let's look into our code to understand how it works. So this is a really simple application with all of our code essentially inside the note view model. And when we want to call our API and send a note, we invoke the send note function, which then makes a post request to a blob website URL. And blob website URL is this jsonblob.com. This website allows us to send any JSON that we want to our JSON blob. And to reference it later, we have to save the URL that it gives us back. So after getting the response, we are parsing it and adding our blob URL to a list of blob URLs or lists of notes, essentially. And after that, we invoke our fetch all notes, which takes all of the URLs for our notes. And for each URL, we do a get that we then cast to our note class. After that, we simply update our notes on our UI by pushing them to our flow, which we then observe in our UI. And that's pretty much it. That's how this app works. Now let's implement the actual serialization. Okay, let's try to launch our starting code. And let's create a note. And as you can see, we get an error, and that's expected because right now we don't have serialization installed. And the error says that it cannot recognize what the node class is, and it cannot essentially serialize it. So we need to install our serialization plugin and also make our node class serializable. So let's do that. As always, the first thing that we'll need to do is set up our dependencies. And to have our Kotlin serialization set up, we need a ContentNegotiation plugin installed. So let's do that. Okay, let's go over to our TOML file to declare the dependency. And we can declare it right below our engines. And the version is going to be our Ktor version. Now let's go over to our build Gradle and resolve this. Since it's a dependency that applies to every platform, we should declare it under common main dependencies. And we can sync our Gradle here. Oops. Nice, now that's resolved. Now for content negotiation to work, we need to apply another plugin. That's the Kotlinx Serialization plugin, and we can declare it under our plugins in the TOML file. So let's do that. And the version is going to be our Kotlin version. Let's remove this dash over here. Okay, now we have to apply this plugin. And now we can sync Gradle. Okay, now that we've got our Kotlinx Serialization plugin, we can finally install our content negotiation. Let's go over to our network helper that's located in common main. And here, let's find the Android implementation by going over to the actual declarations. And to install our content negotiation, we simply do the install content negotiation plugin. Nice. We're not done just yet with our setup though. We've got the negotiation, but now we need to specify the data format that we will be serializing. In our case, it's JSON. So we need the Kotlinx Serialization JSON dependency. Okay, as usual, to import a dependency, we need to declare it in our TOML file. Let's go over there. And let's declare it under our content negotiation. And the version is going to be our Ktor version. Now let's resolve this in our common main. And let's declare it also below our content negotiation. Now let's sync this. Awesome, we've got our JSON serializer, and once again, remember to put this in common main because it applies to all of our platforms. Now let's add this serializer to our HTTP client for Android. So inside the content negotiation lambda, all we need to do is simply specify that we want a JSON serializer. Okay, and the final step in our serialization process is we have to notify our serializer what exactly we want serialized. And in our case, it's our node class. So let's go over there. And to make the serializer generate our serializable node class, we have to append it with the serializable annotation. And now our app should work. So let's confirm this. Let's type in a message. Hello, author myself, and send it. Awesome. We see that my node is showing up here, and that means our serialization works fine. Now, another cool thing that I wanted to mention about Kotlinx Serialization is that Ktor will automatically do the casting for us. Let's see what I mean. If we go over to our node view model, and we go to our fetch all nodes function, we can see that all we're doing is we're just getting the body and it's automatically converted into a node for us, which I think is really nice as we don't have any runtimes error this way. And that's pretty much it. In this lesson, we covered what Kotlinx Serialization is, its benefits over other libraries, some of the features that it has, and we also built a note-taking app with Kotlinx Serialization. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe.